The name of my sermon today is What Do We Owe Ourselves and Each Other? And it came out of an interesting opinion piece I read this week in the Times, talking about the importance of accounting, balance sheets, and knowing how to do double entry bookkeeping. It may surprise you, but it interested me. But what was great was today Steve said to me, well, so what are you preaching on today, honey? And I said, double entry bookkeeping and accounting. And he said, cooking the books. And I said, yeah, no. My husband's had a very interesting life. So it may surprise you, and it still surprises me, that I took a course on this, and this is also the next surprising piece, in secretarial school. Can you imagine what a lousy secretary I was? I lost it. I don't know. I don't know where it is. I know it's important. I know it's important. You're not going to do that, are you? Yeah. No, I was great. Continuing the surprise, actually accounting made a fair amount of sense to me, and I got the theories down easily. It's not the math that bothers me, it's the arithmetic. If you can't proofread, you're not going to win a lot of math prizes. But this author, and I didn't write his name down, I'm sorry, recounted countries at one time in their histories where everyone, as he said, from prostitutes to kings, kept double-entry ledgers about their finances. And they used them not only to tot up their business dealings, but also their moral ones. And that continued. Ben Franklin, for instance, kept a ledger with his sins and his good deeds, a self-reckoning, to be sure. You know, I admit, I found myself saying, well, I wonder if he counted the way he treated his sister as a part of his sin. He probably thought he was generous when he gave her a token rather than a living. But as with money, employing such a system helped one to understand that you wanted more items in the asset columns than in the debit ones. He said, the German economic thinker Max Weber believed that for capitalism to work, average people needed to know how to do double-entry bookkeeping. This is not simply because this type of accounting makes it possible to calculate profit and loss by balancing debits and credits in parallel columns. It is also because good books are balanced in a moral sense. They are the very source of accountability, a word that in fact derives its origins from the word accounting. He, the author, goes on to postulate that unless we were familiar with accounting, we would not be able to assess and audit the financial goings-on of the government. He suggests that high schools teach accounting, that there be a subset of reporters who were trained specifically to report on financial transactions. And apparently in the Netherlands during a certain time period, it was particularly important to the populace to ensure governmental transparency. If the waterworks folk weren't up to date and on the level, catastrophic flooding could ensue. Now, why that's no longer true, I don't know. But that's what he said. But it's true. You really want to know that they're spending their money on repairing the dike and not on themselves. And it doesn't please me at all to note that as I was writing this, the paper announced that one of our counties, I believe it's Northumberland, is in trouble with HUD for bad records, i.e. bad accounting practices. Audits caught the problem. This author is convinced that if, as citizens, we do not get more responsible about our money, there will be more reckoning. Judging from what we know about federal finances and our federal government's recent behavior, it's hard to imagine that he's wrong. So why does this show up in a sermon? Well, the notion of moral reckoning on an actual double-entry balance sheet is pretty interesting. Accountability in thought and action is something we can all struggle with. I have mixed emotions about noting our shortcomings. It is important to recognize when we do wrong, but where we point our eyes is where we drive. And if we spend too much time looking at what we've done wrong, there's a lot less time to do those things, which reinforce the good. So attaboys and attagirls are necessary to our growth. It is a confidence booster to acknowledge that we have done good things. We like ourselves better when we're kind and generous. We're kinder and more generous when we like ourselves. It is, as the story goes, the wolf you want to feed. To be reflective on a consistent basis about our way of being in the world can only be a good thing. But I've had other thoughts. I'm contemplating and beginning to explore, just a touch, holding a hunger and poverty forum next year at some point. Part of that would be exploring our own prejudices and misunderstandings about decision-making in poverty. Knowing something about budgets and balance sheets might be helpful. Even knowing that for some people, they just do not matter. If you have no money, you pay the next thing that's due whenever there's money. To understand that for some, budgeting is in fact a luxury changes our understanding, of how poor people think and negotiate. There's a whole maze for them to negotiate that's just overwhelming and sobering. Poverty is just one reason that our yard sale is not just a fundraiser, but also an outreach ministry. If people can buy a pan for 25 cents, they have things in their house they might not otherwise be able to buy. Keeping the prices low does not just move the merchandise and put the money in the bank for our programs. It makes crucial items accessible to the community. It's hard to imagine that someone can pay a quarter and not a $50 for something. But when you begin to think that one of our central charities is hungry kids and people don't have money to put food on the table for their children, pots and pans are really sort of extraneous. But this helps. But that's the way it is. If the car breaks down, you fix it or you don't work. There is no money for food. There is no money for heat. This is bottom line frightening stuff. Our being able to understand the choices some people live with changes what we have to say to others about our project and how urgent it becomes in our lives. As we move into our annual meeting, it's always useful to be able to read a balance sheet, even though Scott's here to explain it to us. Here, when you see this, then that means that. Ooh. Okay. I'm not so worried here about misappropriations. There's really not enough to misappropriate. But I do fret occasionally about our being able to move forward. A good look at the balance sheet tells us we need to find new and creative ways to raise funds. And that is not simply the purview of the finance people, it's everyone's responsibility. It's easy to rely on what we have, but the time to think about new income streams is now rather than later. And who knows what Sarah and Ann might get up to if there were more money coming in. Beware. There are many reasons for doing this. One is that it's simply good organization. It's good for organizations to keep moving forward. Organizations that are not simply saying still, they're often dying. But we don't need to be bigger, but we need to be vital. And if we want to be bigger, we want to be prepared. And two, other people are investing in our dreams. I've had a very frustrating week this past week. I've done a lot of asking and not gotten a lot of financial response. It's easy to look at that and be discouraged. Although, as I said last week, some of it is because I don't have my ask down right. And I'm working on it, and I called in a friend. I finally remembered, oh, right, I have a friend who does marketing, and he's great at it. So I called him, and we're about to, this week is going to see me, getting my sandpaper out and going crazy on it. But, and although I thought I was pretty clear on the radio, that brought in a big $25. So some of it may be that we have the wrong venues so far. There are things to straighten out, and I've been futzing with that. Yet, at the same time, in different ways, the wider community is stepping up to support this dream. Bucknell is finishing up a movie for us. It looks great. It's really fun. It's far greater than any of us, I think, had expected it to be. And And then I asked the kids if, having done this, they believed in the project. I got, such big eyes and solemn nods. And I'm sorry that these kids were seniors, most of them, because we'd have had them in our pocket. But I think that showing this on campus will get kids in our pocket. They understood a lot. Dagny made us 20 bags and we'll make more. Blake is selling the water bottles. Marjorie Priceman delivered Susquehanna and her little brother River. And actually, I have my computer here, and I will flip my laptop open and put a picture of them up there. And I had asked her to draw these because since we can't show pictures of kids, we need to have mascots that we can tell stories about. And she got the big eye look. I mean, she has great pictures of them with, big eyes, and then she has them looking at empty plates, and then she has them floating with a little lunchbox. It really, so they're adorable, simply adorable, and I'll work a little on their story. And I had thought, that's the great thing about this valley, I thought KJ was going to work on this song, but she's busy and, backed up against a wall with a product she's working on. And so I turned around and I asked Hannah Bingman, and she's going to write the song for us. And she goes, "How soon do you need it? I know this is really urgent and important. I'll get right on it." George Potter has written the first of what I hope will be a series of songs. If you didn't read, was it today I put that in or yesterday? If you haven't gone to listen to it, it's great. I mean, he really captured. I've asked people specifically for things that I think they think about, and as George says, I love numbers. So I had given him the number 68, which is the amount of hours between Friday lunch and Monday breakfast. And the chorus goes, "Hungry kids can't concentrate. They're now playing Hunger Games. Empty plates for 68. Empty plates for 68. Very powerful. But people are getting involved, and we've embarked on a huge dream, and people are saying yes to us. Penn State is using our space to do a food and cooking program, a teaching program for people struggling to make ends meet. That produces a real need for the foundation of the church to be real and strong. And it's not just Love Flows. It's Jungle Teen Center. It's Girls on the Run. It's sex ed. It's PFLAG. Gary, and we may talk about this later, but if you know parents with gay kids, you have to have a certain number of people in a PFLAG or a certain number of parents in a PFLAG program, and we're looking for those parents because we've got we have a few, but Charlene is willing to start a program, and she'd like to get it started before she starts school in September. So we have important things to offer this valley. Our work can be leveraged. We just need a good foundation. We also have important things to offer each other and to offer our kids. UUCSV would be a really good place for us to get ourselves and our families on solid financial footing. And wouldn't it be wonderful to teach our kids not only how to build projects and organizations, or not only how to hold themselves accountable, but how to build products and organizations that can flourish because they've been well attended to. Good knowledge, and to say that Blake, I sat next to her when we were at the fair last week, and she's very carefully writing things down, and apparently her father is teaching her double entry accounting. So there she was, and all her little, every time she sold a bottle, it got written down, and it was like, showing us up. We hate that, right? But it's great. And, as I said last week, I think in Joys and Concerns, wouldn't it be amazing if we raised a generation of activists, if we had, a club of kids that decided to do something remarkable in this valley. And, we're already stretched across the school systems. It's great stuff. So good knowledge of where you are financially and spiritually allows for a great deal of flexibility and creativity. Wouldn't it be wonderful to understand accountability as a spiritual responsibility? Now, there are places in my life where this notion is really much more about do what I say rather than do what I do. I don't have an easy time with structured or consistent anything other than I've been pretty good about my musings and blogs. And sometimes I'm at the just pay the next bill consideration, but I think it's worth considering in our lives. It's also worth considering here. How are we accountable, each and every one of us, to and for the church? How do we ensure financial stability and promote outreach? And, Scott and I talked yesterday or last week or some point, I don't know, and he and Sarah had been down to the JPD meeting, and he had noticed that everyone on the boards of things were ministers. And in a UU church, it's totally inappropriate. The church is not run by the ministers. And you can understand ministers get worried, oh, are we going to look at the right things? Because we all know you're too stupid to think about what the right things are. No, this is your church. One of the amazing things that people, when I'm in the women's clergy thing, people can't believe that my responsibilities are to you for your spiritual welfare and well-being, and not to the building. And, who's on the committee isn't, I may know who might be interested in it, but I'm not the person that is making those decisions. So I'm not throwing anybody out to go work on the JPD. There are plenty of our leadership positions here, but it is an interesting consideration. So here's the end of the sermon reveal. This isn't one of those sermons that's going to answer that question. It's one of those sermons that asks questions. But remember, I've always wanted our motto to be, you've got the answers, we've got the questions. So how can we make this place richer in every way? And how can we make our kids and ourselves stronger? I think we owe it to ourselves to find out, individually and communally. I hope we do. Goodness knows, if you look around this place, we are chock-a-block with resources. So let's make this meeting a jumping-off place for more.